Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Siti Nur Zubaida binti Marlis and today I will be presenting my research article titled Spatiotemporal Distribution of Microplastic in Miri coastal area, Northwest Borneo. This research is based on a published study and focus on the increasing problem of microplastic pollution in Malaysia, specifically in a coastal city called Miri in Sarawak. The research also highlights how the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened this issue due to the surge in plastic-based PPE waste like masks and gloves. So for the introduction, microplastics are tiny plastic particles that are less than 5 mm in size. They are formed when larger plastic items break down due to sunlight, heat, or physical wear. For instance, when plastic bags or fishing nets break apart in the ocean. These particles are especially dangerous because they are small enough to be ingested by marine animals and eventually they can end up in our food and water. Microplastics are now considered a global pollution issue because they are found in ocean, river, soil, air and even in human blood. Miri is a coastal city located in the state of Sarawak on the island of Borneo. Like many other coastal areas, it is exposed to pollution from river discharge, human activity, fishing, tourism, and industrial zone. What makes this study more important is the fact that Miri also experienced increased plastic pollution during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially from face masks and gloves, which were not always disposed of properly. These plastic items eventually degrade into microplastics and end up in the ocean. So, this study is important because it looks at the pollution problem before and after COVID and cover different seasons. To see how the study has four main objectives. First, to find out how microplastics are spread in the Miri coastal area during three different time periods, which are before and after COVID-19. Second, to analyze their characteristics such as shape, size, color, and the type of plastic or polymer. Third, to identify where these microplastics might be coming from. For example, whether they are from fishing gear, packaging, or PPE. And last but not least, to understand the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on microplastic pollution levels in this area. So, for the methodology, we have 5, which are sampling, preparation, extraction, analysis, and statistical analysis. Samples were collected from the Miri coast in 3 different years to represent different conditions. In 2013, samples were taken during the monsoon season. In 2014, they were collected after the monsoon or the post-monsoon period. And in 2022, samples were collected to represent the post-COVID period. In total, 33 locations were sampled across the coastal area. These time intervals allowed researchers to compare the abundance and type of microplastics across different seasons and also observe how pollution levels have changed since the pandemic. The sediment samples collected from the beach were processed in several steps. First, the samples were dried in an oven at 60 degrees Celsius. Then, they were sieved to remove any particles bigger than 5 mm. Next, organic materials like shells or plant matter were removed using 30% hydrogen peroxide. After that, density separation was done using zinc chloride solution. Since microplastics are lighter than sediment, they float and can be separated. The separated particles were then filtered through Whatman filter paper to collect the microplastics. These steps ensure that only small particles were isolated for analysis. Once the microplastics were extracted, they were analyzed in several ways. Under stereo microscope, each particle was classified by its shape, color, and size. To determine what type of plastic each particle was made of, the researchers used advanced tools like SEMEDS, which shows the surface texture, and chemical elements, FTIR and Raman spectroscopy, which identify the exact polymer. For statistical analysis, they use SPSS software, applying principal component analysis (PCA) and factor analysis (FA). These methods help them group similar types of microplastics and guess possible sources like household waste, industrial plastic, or PPE. Now let's look at the result. The number of microplastics found increased over time. In 2013, monsoon 310 microplastics were found. In 2014, post-monsoon 458 microplastics. And in 2022, post-COVID, 675 microplastics. This is a 180% increase from monsoon to post-COVID. The sharp increase after COVID-19 shows that PPE waste and poor plastic disposal during the pandemic had a big impact on the environment. The most polluted areas were near river mouth and industrial zone, where plastic waste tends to accumulate. Across all samples, the most common microplastic shape was fiber. In fact, fiber made up about 63 to 71% of the microplastics found. This makes sense because fibers often come from synthetic clothes, fishing nets, ropes, and mats. Other shapes found include fragments, foam, film, and microbeads, but they were much less common. In terms of size, most microplastics found after COVID were less than 1 mm, making them harder to detect and remove. For color, blue, red, transparent, and black microplastics were most common. These colors are linked to everyday items like plastic packaging, fishing ropes, and containers. The most common polymers identified were PE, PP, PS, PET, and PTFE, which is used in industrial materials. These are all types of plastic used in packaging, containers, textiles, and medical tools. For the discussion, the findings of the study shows a clear pattern. Microplastic pollution in Miri is not only increasing over time, but it also shows clear links to human activity, seasonal changes, and especially the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the most important findings is the sharp increase in microplastic abundance post-COVID, which suggests that the pandemic significantly worsened the plastic pollution problem. During COVID-19, the use of single-use plastics and PPE, such as masks, gloves, and face shield, increased globally. In Malaysia, a large amount of this PPE waste end up in the environment either through improper disposal, illegal dumping, or weak enforcement of waste collection. These items are made from non-biodegradable polymers like polypropylene, which break down into microplastics over time. The fibers released from these items then accumulate in beach, river, and marine ecosystems. Another important point is the role of rivers and rainfall in the movement of microplastics. The study found that estuaries near Miri River and Barang River were microplastic hotspots. These rivers collect waste from inland areas and carry it to the coast, especially during the monsoon season. When heavy rain increases water flow and surface runoff. This means that land-based activity like laundry, fishing, agriculture, or even roadside littering can contribute to microplastic pollution in the ocean. The use of SEMEDS technology also showed that many microplastics had rough surface and chemical signs of weathering. This suggests that these plastics have been exposed to sunlight, heat, seawater, and friction, showing how they degrade slowly but never completely disappear. What's most worrying is the microplastics are now almost impossible to remove once they enter the ocean. They are so small that many pass through filters in wastewater treatment, plants. And because they can be ingested by small fish and plankton, they enter the food chain, potentially affecting not just animals but also human health. So, the study doesn't just show numbers, it reveals a serious long-term threat to both the environment and public health, made worse by how society handles plastic during times of crisis like a pandemic. To conclude, this study confirms that microplastic pollution in Miri coastal waters is rising, with a clear increasing after the COVID-19 pandemic. The study proves that fiber-type microplastics, which come from everyday items like clothes, fishing nets, ropes, and face masks, are the most dominant type found in beach sediments. The increasing amount of microplastics, especially very small particles below 1 millimeter, show how difficult it is to control this type of pollution once it starts. The findings also show that human activities, especially waste mismanagement, are the main drivers of these problems. The COVID-19 pandemic played a huge role. The rise in PPE usage saved lives, but poor disposal methods created a new wave of pollution. This shows that emergency health response must go hand in hand with environmental responsibility. So what can we do moving forward? First, there is a need for stricter policies on plastic use, especially single-use plastic. Second, public awareness campaigns are needed so that people understand the long-term effects of littering and bad disposal habits. Third, the government should improve waste collection systems, especially in rural and coastal areas. And finally, we need stronger collaboration between scientists, industries, and the public to find eco-friendly alternatives and reduce plastic dependency. If we don't act now, microplastics will continue to build up, and the impact will be seen not just in the ocean, but in our food, water, and health. This is the reference that I have used from the research article titled Spatiotemporal Distribution of Microplastics in Miri Coastal Area, Northwest Borneo, published in 2023. So I think that's all from me. Thank you.